Hello and welcome to episode 11 of the Retro Game Gauntlet Reviewcast. I'm your host, Torsvik, and this week I played Space Hulk, Vengeance of the Blood Angels for the PlayStation. Space Hulk was a tactical first-person shooter developed by Key Game in 1996, or 95 on the 3DO, based on the specialist game of the same title by Games Workshop. In Space Hulk, you play as the genetically engineered super soldiers known as Spiz Marines. It is your mission to infiltrate and reroute the path of a massive scuppered spaceship. You are equipped with massively oversized power armor called Terminator armor, and an assortment of weapons such as Stormbolters, Fists, Stormbolters, Stormbolters, Fists, Stormbolters, Fists, and Fists. I'm being slightly facetious off the bat, but I'll cover it more later. Your task will be opposed primarily by the Gene Stealer threat. Gene Stealers are xenomorph-like Lamaux that quickly move and attack with their deadly claws. The game opens with an ambitious attempt to summarize all the relevant 40k lore. The manual provides an additional 2 pages of fluff. If you're already a fan of 40k, some of you may be thinking about how daunting the task of summarizing 40k is. The title screen gives you the options of playing through a campaign or through historical scenarios. For the purpose of this review, I only extensively played the campaign. In the campaign, you are given a limited number of Marines to complete each task. Surviving Marines carry over into the next scenario, gaining experience. Each scenario is opened with a briefing from your chapter master. The historical scenarios are only one encounter long, but have more variation in their environment and arsenal. With all that established, let's move on to the breakdown. As I said before, I mostly just played the campaign, so most of my observations will be revolving around it. There's not too much to say about the controls. It is a first-person shooter, but the slow nature of your Terminator armor makes it not necessary to have to make snap aim adjustments. There are 2 modes of play, first-person and tactical. In first-person mode, you play the game as a normal, albeit chunky, first-person shooter. The game operates on a loose grid. There is a grid, but you do not snap to each grid tile. You can fire your weapon on X and interact with things with triangle. If you fail to take out your opponent at ranged, he will engage you in a melee sequence. X attacks and circle parries. It was hard to tell exactly how the melee works. From what I saw, it seemed like it was a mix of RNG, probably based on your Marine's level, and the animation that the Gene Stealer is performing. If the Gene Stealer raises a claw, hit circle. If he's defending, hit X. By pressing select, you can open tactical mode. Here you are given a map of the area. You can give commands to each of your Marines, including move position, follow, pick up, and close door. You have a limited meter in which you can stop time and give these commands. Once the meter runs out, time flows normally again. You can still give commands hot. You can give commands to your character, and then change into first-person mode to watch him execute his commands from his viewpoint. As far as I saw, you don't get any weapons other than the bolt gun and the fist in campaign mode. I did get a chance to use the heavy flamer in a practice scenario. From what I can tell, it comes with limited ammo, but can block off passages. No idea what the benefits of melee weapons are. I assume that they just improve the melee RNG. Your Terminators are far more powerful than your opponents, but Gene Stealers constantly respawn from marked areas on the map. When it comes to shooting your opponents, there appears to be some RNG. Sometimes you can kill on the first shot, and if unlucky, you may find yourself laying 10 shots into the Xeno. This may seem a bit weird if you don't play many traditional games like the one this is based on, and I don't necessarily agree with the idea either. This game was made, though, during a time when hit detection was poor, so there was a lot of skill/die roll hybrid games, like Morrowind. With how much more powerful your Terminators are, there's primarily 2 methods of death. First, whether from RNG or just your response time, the Gene Stealer is able to soak your shots and close the distance. Second, your gun jams and the Gene Stealer closes the gap before you can unjam your gun and fire. In most games, putting your life into the hands of RNG is a bad design choice, but in this situation, the mechanic is properly utilized. To counter the RNG, you need to use the buddy system. Simply put, you'll lose a Marine if his gun jams, but the chance of 2 Marines' guns jamming simultaneously is low. Furthermore, 3 Marines all failing is near impossible. This does mean, though, that you can't cover much ground, but that is the trade-off. When a Marine does die, he is permanently lost for the rest of the campaign. You are occasionally given reinforcements, but not often. This ends up making the campaign a war of attrition. Each Marine you lose makes the following missions progressively more difficult. Most missions you are required to move from location A to location B, sometimes with a minimum number of Marines required to reach the exit point. Occasionally, you will be required to accomplish additional tasks, such as retrieving an object and taking it to a specific point. With the mechanics summarized, we can move on to the analysis. It sucks to review this game. Not because I like Warhammer, I have a track history of hating games from series and IPs I otherwise enjoy. Also, anyone who knows Games Workshop also knows that games based off of their IP have a record of being mediocre to outright bad. No, the painful part of reviewing this game is that it feels like watching raw, unused potential being thrown into the rubbish. This game is basically tactical Doom, but done very poorly. I'll start with the technical problems. The size of your Marine is simultaneously too large and too small. It's too large in the way that you collide with your fellow Marines. Even if you use tactical mode to place your character, your fellow Marines will still complain as if you were straddling the grid squares. For being too small, oftentimes you need to be awkwardly in the dead middle of a tile in order to pick up and interact with the object on that tile. Wall collision is a pain as well. I actually really like the concept of slowly walking down narrow corridors as a living tank. The problem is though that with wall collision, anytime you collide with the wall, the game snaps you to look perpendicular to it. This means that if you are backpedaling and firing forward, if you brush up against the wall, your vision is snapped 90 degrees to the side. There is also a lack of interesting scenarios to the campaign. There are interesting historical scenarios, but for the most part as a single player game, the campaign is going to be the main appeal. About the first 10 or so scenarios had variation to them, but most of them devolve into get all your guys from point A to point B. Now, it could have been fine if all the scenarios were just simple go from here to there, if there was some strategy to them. There were a couple of these simple scenarios that I really enjoyed, because there was a distinct strategy of blocking off corridors and turtling forward tactically. Many fall apart into a strategy where you just set everyone to follow the main character and move in a large group. This is a problem because too many levels had massive open rooms, terrain that benefits all of your Marines moving as one blob towards the exit. More well-designed maps with narrow corridors would have easily offset this. These open room themed missions could have been more interspersed and placed earlier in the game rather than in a clump at the end. As an example, the last 4 missions reuse the same map, having you just move back and forth from the same 2 points. Adding to the lack of strategy are the flaccid doors. In the game, you can close doors in an attempt to block off the gene stealers from taking certain paths. But it rarely seemed that there was reason to closing the doors. The doors hold up for only a few seconds against the gene stealers. The best they seem to do is sometimes it can mess with the enemy pathfinding. The last 10 or so missions seem to have only 2 purposes. First is filler, really basic stages to increase the size of the campaign with minimal effort. And the second is to cut down on your number of Marines to create an artificial challenge. Giving you longer levels just forces you to rub up against RNG, and through attrition of rolling dice, you'll eventually begin to lose Marines. These levels also end up becoming rough because of the Marine's AI. Whenever a Marine sees a gene stealer, he stops, turns, shoots, turns again, and then starts walking. Because of this, you are forced to crawl forward and experience more die rolls against you, or leave Marines behind to fend for themselves. I would have been interested in outfitting my Marines each scenario, but unless there's something I missed, there's no way to change your outfit. If there is a way, I didn't see in the manual, but it appears you have to go through the entire game with just the bolter. If you want to try the other weapons, you'll have to go and play the historical scenarios. I'll move into positives, but don't worry, it'll be brief. I like all the assets. The sprites look neat, and the level themselves are alright. The CG is fun, and voice acting is entertaining as well. While in missions, there is a set of pre-recorded voiceovers that play to describe each of the Marines' actions. At first, I didn't like the lack of music, but it did grow on me and it does fit the atmosphere. I also like everything about the strategy concept, but that's where it all breaks down. Most everything I like this game is window dressing. This game is exactly the reason why I started making these reviews, aiming to look at gameplay elements to better understand what makes a game good. And older games are a great medium for this since their graphics are outdated and storytelling is often minimalistic. Now this game does break the 2-on-5 because it is based around a good concept, the sort of tactical Doom concept. That being said though, this game had the massive potential to get a 5-on-5, but it is so poorly executed that I'm giving it a massive 2-point reduction. 3-on-5. Try again. Anyway, I'll close this out with a shill. Go ahead and smash that approve button and thumb vote the video likewise. I post a poll every weekend to decide what game I'll play next on my Twitter. If you would like to see me play any of the Gauntlet games live, you can find me on Twitch. Links for all this stuff will be in the description. Stolen video is Strolling Through Ultramar by Leroy Plambik. Intro and outro is Casual Sax by Luxury Elite.